Rebecca Morgan's hands trembled as she faced the crowd, their faces twisted with righteous fury. Snow fell around them like frozen judgment. She had 60 seconds before they drove her from town into the killing cold. "Please," she whispered, but her voice vanished in the howling wind. "Stay with me until the very end of this story. Hit that subscribe button right now and comment what city you're watching from, so I can see how far Rebecca's story travels across the world. Because what happens next will restore your faith in second chances." The snow had been falling for 3 days straight when they came for Rebecca Morgan. December 1879. Stillwater, Montana Territory. A town of 400 souls clinging to the edge of civilization, where winter killed the weak and gossip killed faster. Rebecca stood behind the counter of Harriet's dress shop pins, between her lips, adjusting the hem on Mrs. Patricia Whitfield's new traveling dress. Her fingers worked quickly despite the cold that seeped through the shop's thin walls. She'd been a seamstress in Stillwater for 18 months. 18 months of keeping her head down, her hands busy, her past buried. "Higher on the left side," Mrs. Whitfield said, not looking down. She never looked at Rebecca directly. None of them did. "Yes, ma'am." The shop bell chimed. Cold air rushed in carrying snow and the sound of boots on wood. Heavy boots, multiple pairs. Rebecca's hands stilled. She knew that particular quality of silence that preceded disaster. She'd heard it before in another town, another life. "Rebecca Morgan." Sheriff Tom Brennan's voice filled the small shop. Not a question, an accusation. She straightened slowly, the pins falling from her lips. 5 men stood inside the door. The sheriff, Deputy Collins, Harriet's husband George. 2 ranch hands she recognized from the Silver Creek spread. Mrs. Whitfield stepped down from the fitting platform quickly, her half-pinned dress forgotten. "Sheriff Brennan, has something happened?" "That's what we're here to find out, ma'am." The sheriff's eyes never left Rebecca. "Miss Morgan, we need you to come with us." Rebecca's throat closed. "Why?" "There's been an accusation made. Serious accusation. You'll need to answer for it." "What accusation?" Her voice came out steady. A miracle considering her heart was trying to break through her ribs. George stepped forward. His face was red, whether from cold or anger, Rebecca couldn't tell. "Don't play innocent. Half the town's been whispering for weeks. Now we got proof." "Proof of what?" Rebecca's hands clenched at her sides. "I don't understand." "The Rawlings place was robbed 3 nights ago," Sheriff Brennan said. "Someone broke in while they were at the church social. Took Mrs. Rawlings' jewelry, cash money, family silver. Everything valuable they owned." Rebecca's stomach dropped. "And you think I think someone's seen you walking past the Rawlings house that night. Someone's seen you carrying a carpet bag that looked mighty heavy." The sheriff crossed his arms. "Now I'm willing to believe maybe you got an explanation. Maybe you was just taking a walk in the snow at 9 o'clock at night carrying luggage for no good reason. So let's go down to my office and you can tell me all about it." "I wasn't near the Rawlings house." Rebecca's voice rose despite her efforts to control it. "I was here in the back room finishing Mrs. Henderson's wedding dress. I worked until past midnight. Harriet can confirm." "Harriet left at 6 o'clock. George's voice was flat. "You was here alone." "But I didn't leave. I slept in the back room like I always do when I work late. Harriet lets me—" "Convenient," Deputy Collins muttered. "No witnesses." "Who says they saw me?" Rebecca demanded. "Who's making this accusation?" The men exchanged glances. Finally, the sheriff spoke. "Witness wants to remain anonymous for now, but they're reliable." "Reliable?" Rebecca tasted copper. She'd bitten her lip without realizing. "So someone who won't even show their face is claiming I'm a thief, and you believe them. We believe the evidence. The Rawlings silver turned up this morning. Part of it, anyway. 3 pieces sold to a pawn shop over in Copper Falls." Sheriff Brennan pulled a folded paper from his coat. Pawnbroker described the seller. Young woman, dark hair, about 5'4", wearing a gray cloak. That sound like anyone you know. Half the women in Montana Territory fit that description. But Rebecca knew it didn't matter. They'd already decided. I've never been to Copper Falls. I've never stolen anything in my life. Then you won't mind if we search your room, George said. Rebecca's breath caught. You have no right. We got every right when there's been a robbery. The sheriff nodded to Deputy Collins. Check the back. No. Rebecca moved to block the door, but George grabbed her arm. His grip was iron. Don't make this harder, girl. Through the shop window, Rebecca could see people gathering in the street. Word spread fast in small towns. Mrs. Whitfield had already slipped out the front door, no doubt rushing to share the scandal. Deputy Collins emerged from the back room less than 2 minutes later. In his hands, wrapped in an old shawl, were 4 silver pieces. Candlesticks and a serving tray, ornate and expensive. The air left Rebecca's lungs. Well now, Sheriff Brennan said softly, looks like we got our thief. Those aren't mine. Rebecca's voice broke. I've never seen those before. Someone put them there. Someone setting me up. That's what they all say. George's grip tightened on her arm. Sheriff, what are you waiting for? The crowd outside had grown. 20 people, 30 more arriving every moment. Rebecca could see their faces pressed against the frosted windows, could see the satisfaction in their eyes. The hunger. They'd been waiting for this. For her to prove what they'd always suspected. That she was exactly what she appeared to be, a woman alone with no family, no references, no past she'd speak of. Suspicious from the start. Rebecca Morgan. Sheriff Brennan said formally. You're under arrest for robbery. You got anything to say before I put these irons on you? Rebecca's mind raced. This was happening too fast, too perfectly orchestrated. Someone had planted that silver. Someone had made sure she'd be alone that night. Someone had paid the pawnbroker to describe her. But who and why? I didn't do this, she said. It sounded pathetic even to her own ears. Please, you have to believe me. Believing ain't my job. Evidence is. The sheriff pulled iron shackles from his belt. Hold out your hands. Sheriff? Harriet's voice came from the doorway. Rebecca's employer stood there, snow gathering on her shoulders. Her face was pale but set. I can't let you do this. Harriet, stay out of it, George warned. That silver wasn't in Rebecca's room yesterday. I was back there looking for spare buttons. I would have seen it. Hope flared in Rebecca's chest. You saying someone put it there today? The sheriff's eyebrows rose. I'm saying Rebecca's worked for me 18 months and never took so much as a penny from the till. She's honest and hardworking and a stranger. George interrupted. We don't know nothing about her. Where she came from, why she came here, what she's running from. Now we know. She's a thief. You don't know anything. Rebecca's voice cut through the shop. You've decided I'm guilty because it's easier than asking questions. Because I'm alone and you can... Enough. Sheriff Brennan grabbed her wrist, snapped the iron cuff around it. The metal was so cold it burned. You'll get a chance to defend yourself at trial. Until then, you're coming with me. They dragged her toward the door. Rebecca's boots slid on the wooden floor. Her mind screamed at her to fight to run, but where into the Montana winter, she'd freeze before she made it a mile. The crowd parted as they pulled her into the street. The snow was falling heavier now, fat flakes that clung to her hair and eyelashes. Rebecca had left her cloak inside. The cold bit through her cotton dress immediately. Thief! The shout came from somewhere in the crowd. Rebecca couldn't see who. Thought she was so respectable? Another voice called. Working in Harriet's shop like butter wouldn't melt. Probably been robbing folks for months. Should check her room for more stolen goods. Their voices built on each other, creating a wall of accusation. Rebecca kept her head down, trying to watch her footing on the icy boardwalk. The sheriff's office was 3 buildings down. 3 buildings that felt like 3 miles. Wait! The voice was young, female. Rebecca looked up. Sarah Brennan, the sheriff's daughter, stood in the street, 16 years old, with her father's stubborn jaw and her dead mother's kind eyes. Rebecca had altered 2 dresses for her last month. They'd talked about books about dreams of seeing the ocean someday. Papa, you're wrong. Rebecca wouldn't steal. Sarah, get inside. The sheriff's voice hardened. This ain't your concern. She helped me when Mama's dress didn't fit for the dance. She stayed up all night fixing it and wouldn't take extra payment. Does that sound like a thief? Sarah. Besides, I saw someone walking past the Rawlings place that night. It wasn't Rebecca. The crowd went silent. Even the wind seemed to pause. What are you talking about? Sheriff Brennan's hand tightened on Rebecca's arm. I was coming home from Mary's house. I saw someone in a gray cloak, but it wasn't Rebecca. This woman was taller, and she had blonde hair showing under her hood. Rebecca's heart hammered. Someone was framing her. Someone specific. You're mistaken, George said quickly. Too quickly. It was dark, you was seeing things. I know what I saw. Sarah's voice rose. And I saw you talking to Virgil Hayes in the alley behind the Mercantile this morning. Saw money change hands. What was that about Mr. Henderson? George's face went purple. You little... That's enough. A new voice cut through the chaos. Deep, authoritative, with an edge that made people step back instinctively. Rebecca looked up. A man sat on a massive black horse at the edge of the crowd. She'd never seen him before. She would have remembered. He was tall, broad-shouldered, maybe 35 years old. His coat was expensive real leather fur-lined collar, and his hat was pushed back enough to show dark hair silvering at the temples. His face was weathered, but strong, with a jaw that could have been carved from granite, and eyes the color of storm clouds. Eyes that were fixed on Rebecca with an intensity that made her breath catch. Gideon Hart. Sheriff Brennan said, his tone changing entirely. Respect. Maybe fear. Didn't expect to see you in town. Clearly. The man Gideon dismounted with easy grace. His boots hit the packed snow without sound. What's going on here, Tom? Town business. Nothing that concerns the Hart Ranch. I'm making it my business. Gideon walked forward. The crowd parted for him the way water parts for a ship's bow. This woman. What's she accused of? Robbery. We got evidence. What evidence? Stolen property in her room. Witness putting her at the scene. Which witness? Sheriff Brennan hesitated. Can't say yet. Can't or won't. Gideon stopped directly in front of Rebecca. Up close, he was even more imposing. 6'3" at least, with the kind of solid strength that came from years of hard work. He smelled like leather and pine and winter air. His eyes scanned her face. Not leering. Assessing. Reading something in her expression that made his jaw tighten. Sir, this really ain't... the sheriff began. How much was stolen? Gideon interrupted, still looking at Rebecca. What? The Rawlings robbery. How much was taken? About $500 worth. Jewelry, silver, cash. And how much turned up in her room? Sheriff Brennan shifted. 4 pieces of silver. Worth? Maybe $50. So, where's the other $450 worth? Gideon's voice was dangerously quiet. Because if this woman's a thief clever enough to sell part of the haul in another town, she's smart enough not to hide the rest in her own room where any fool could find it. Rebecca stared at him. He was defending her. A complete stranger was defending her and doing a better job than she'd managed herself. Maybe she hid it somewhere else, Deputy Collins offered. Or maybe someone planted that silver to frame her. Gideon turned to face the crowd. George Henderson, you were awful quick to volunteer for this arrest party. Why's that? George's face went white, then red. I got no reason to frame nobody. No, your dress shop's been losing business to Harriet's for 6 months. Convenient if her best seamstress got locked up. That's slander. It's a question. Gideon's voice carried across the street. Tom, you investigated whether anyone else might have committed this robbery? Or did you just jump on the easiest suspect? Now hold on. Because I'm looking at a woman with no criminal record who's worked honestly for 18 months, who's being accused by an anonymous witness and convicted by planted evidence. And I'm wondering why a lawman would be so eager to arrest her without asking basic questions. Sheriff Brennan's hand dropped from Rebecca's arm. Mr. Hart, I appreciate your concern, but I'm not concerned. I'm involved. Gideon reached out and with deliberate care removed the iron cuff from Rebecca's wrist. Because this woman isn't going anywhere with you. The crowd erupted. Voices rose in protest and shock and confusion. You can't just, George started. I can. I am. Gideon's voice cut through the noise like a blade. Rebecca Morgan is under my protection now. Anyone who has a problem with that can take it up with me, personally. The threat in those last words was unmistakable. Rebecca had heard stories about the Hart Ranch, biggest spread in Montana territory. Gideon Hart employed 40 men, controlled half the grazing land between here and the Canadian border, and had the kind of money and influence that made territorial governors nervous. No one in Stillwater was going to challenge him. Not openly. This is irregular, Sheriff Brennan said weakly. So is arresting someone on manufactured evidence. Gideon turned to Rebecca. For the first time, his expression softened slightly. Miss Morgan, I'm offering you a choice. You can go with the sheriff and take your chances with whatever justice this town dispenses. Or you can come with me. I'll make sure you get a fair investigation and a real defense. Rebecca's mind reeled. Why? The word came out as a whisper. You don't even know me. Something flickered in Gideon's storm-gray eyes. Pain, maybe. Or memory. Because 8 years ago in a town not much different from this one, I watched a woman get convicted of a crime she didn't commit. Watched them hang her before anyone asked real questions or found the actual thief. His jaw clenched. Her name was Catherine Hart. She was my sister, and I was too young and too powerless to stop it. The street went silent except for the wind. I'm not powerless anymore, Gideon said, and I won't stand by and watch it happen again. He extended his hand, not grabbing, not demanding, offering. Rebecca looked at that hand, looked at the crowd surrounding them, at the sheriff's uncertain face, at the evidence that had been planted to destroy her, at the winter that would kill her if she ran. She looked at Gideon Hart's eyes and saw something she hadn't seen in years. Someone willing to believe her. Rebecca placed her hand in his. His fingers closed around hers, warm, strong, steady. He drew her close, then lifted her onto his horse in one smooth motion. The animal didn't even shift beneath the added weight. Gideon mounted behind her, his arm coming around her waist to steady her. Rebecca could feel the solid strength of his chest against her back, could feel heat radiating from him that made her realize how badly she was shivering. Tom, Gideon said, looking down at the sheriff. You want to investigate this robbery properly, you know where to find me. Until then, Miss Morgan stays at Hart's Peak Ranch, under my protection. That clear? Sheriff Brennan nodded slowly. He looked relieved, Rebecca realized. Glad someone else had taken responsibility. George, Gideon continued, his voice dropping to something cold and dangerous. If I find out you had anything to do with framing this woman, you'll answer for it, and not in a courtroom. George said nothing, but the guilt on his face was answer enough. Gideon turned the horse. The crowd scattered. As they rode past Harriet's shop, Rebecca saw her former employer standing in the doorway. Harriet mouthed 2 words, "Thank you." Then they were moving through the snow-covered streets, leaving Stillwater behind. The town that had been Rebecca's refuge for 18 months now revealed as just another trap. She should have been terrified. She was riding off into a blizzard with a man she didn't know, toward a place she'd never been, with no idea what he truly wanted from her. But as Gideon's arm tightened protectively around her waist, and the town disappeared into the swirling white, Rebecca felt something she hadn't felt since she was 16 years old. Safe. "Thank you," she whispered. "Don't thank me yet." Gideon's voice rumbled through his chest into her back. "We've got about a dozen problems to solve, starting with figuring out who actually robbed the Rawlings place and why they want you taking the blame." "I don't know. I don't have enemies here. I barely know anyone." "Someone knows you, and they hate you enough to see you hanged." He paused. "Unless there's something you're not telling me." Rebecca stiffened. Here it was. The inevitable questions about her past, about where she'd come from, about why a woman alone traveled to a remote Montana town and kept to herself for 18 months. "I'm not a thief," she said. "Didn't ask if you were. Asked if there's something you're not telling me." "There are a lot of things I'm not telling you." Rebecca's hands clenched in the horse's mane. "But none of them have anything to do with the Rawlings robbery." Gideon was quiet for a long moment. The only sounds were the horse's hooves breaking through snow and the wind howling across the open plain. "Fair enough," he finally said. "Everyone's got secrets, Miss Morgan. I'm not asking you to bare your soul, just asking you to be straight with me about anything that might help figure out who's behind this." "I will. I promise." "Good. Because whoever framed you went to a lot of trouble. This wasn't random. This was planned." His arm around her waist tightened slightly. "And planned means dangerous. So until we sort this out, you stay close to me. Understood?" Rebecca nodded. She didn't trust her voice. The snow fell heavier as they rode into the wilderness. Behind them, Stillwater vanished into white silence. Ahead there was only wind and winter and a stranger's promise of protection. And somewhere in the storm, Rebecca Morgan felt something shift inside her chest. The fear that had controlled her for 2 years. The fear of being found, being exposed, being destroyed again loosened slightly. Because for the first time since everything fell apart, she wasn't facing the darkness alone. She had an ally, even if she had no idea why he'd chosen to be one. The ride to Hart's Peak Ranch took 2 hours through conditions that would have killed a lesser horseman. Gideon navigated the storm with the ease of someone who'd spent 35 winters in this territory, his body automatically adjusting to guide the horse through drifts that reached the animal's chest. Rebecca stopped shivering after the first half hour. Whether from Gideon's body heat or from sheer exhaustion, she couldn't tell. Her mind kept circling back to the same questions. Who had planted that silver? Who wanted her destroyed badly enough to risk framing her for a hanging offense? And why had Gideon Hart risked his reputation to save a woman he'd never met? "Almost there," Gideon said against her ear. His voice cut through the wind. "You still conscious?" "Barely." "Stay with me another 10 minutes." Rebecca forced her eyes open. Through the swirling white, she could make out dark shapes, buildings, fences. The ranch materialized from the storm like something from a dream, or a sanctuary. The main house was massive, 2 stories of solid timber, with smoke rising from 3 chimneys. Beside it stood a barn that could have housed 40 horses, corrals, a bunkhouse, storage buildings all arranged with military precision. This wasn't just a ranch. It was a fortress. Gideon rode straight to the main house. Before he could dismount, the front door opened and a woman appeared. She was perhaps 50, with silver-streaked black hair, pulled into a severe bun, and the kind of face that looked like it rarely smiled. "Mr. Gideon." Her voice carried an accent. Spanish, maybe. "You bring trouble home in this storm?" "I brought someone who needs help, Rosa." Gideon swung down from the horse, then reached up for Rebecca. His hands circled her waist and lifted her as though she weighed nothing. Her legs buckled when her feet hit the ground. Gideon caught her before she fell. "Inside," Rosa commanded. "Both of you, before you freeze into statues for me to dust." The house's warmth hit Rebecca like a physical blow. Her skin burned as blood rushed back into frozen extremities. She swayed again. "Easy." Gideon's arm was around her shoulders, supporting her weight. "Rosa, get some coffee, strong, and something to eat." "Already doing it." Rosa was moving through the house with brisk efficiency. "You girl, what's your name?" "Rebecca. Rebecca Morgan." Well, Rebecca Morgan, you look like death walked over. Come. Rosa led them through a main room dominated by a stone fireplace that could have roasted an entire steer. The furniture was heavy masculine, built for comfort rather than show. Books lined two walls. Real books, leather-bound, well-read. Rebecca's fingers itched to touch them. Rosa pushed her into a chair near the fire. Within minutes, hot coffee appeared in her hands, and a thick blanket materialized around her shoulders. The older woman moved with practiced care, checking Rebecca's fingers and ears for frostbite. "You're lucky," Rosa pronounced. "Stupid but lucky. No serious damage." "Rosa thinks everyone's stupid," Gideon said. He'd removed his coat and hat. In the firelight, Rebecca could see him clearly for the first time. He was younger than she'd thought. Maybe 32, not 35. The silver in his hair and the lines around his eyes came from weather and work, not age. He was also watching her with an intensity that made her hands shake around the coffee cup. "Stop staring at the girl like she's a puzzle to solve," Rosa snapped. "Let her drink in peace." "She is a puzzle." Gideon settled into the chair across from Rebecca. "Someone went to considerable trouble to frame her. I want to know why. Maybe because they're bastards who enjoy destroying innocent people." Rosa set a plate of bread and cold meat on the table beside Rebecca. "Eat. You're too thin." "I need to understand what I'm dealing with." Gideon continued, ignoring Rosa's commentary. "Miss Morgan, how long have you been in Stillwater?" 18 months. "Where'd you come from?" Rebecca's hand tightened on the cup. "East." "That's not an answer." "It's all the answer I'm giving right now." Rebecca met his eyes. "You said you didn't need me to bare my soul. Just tell you anything relevant to the robbery. Where I came from isn't relevant." Gideon leaned back, studying her. "You're running from something." It wasn't a question. Rebecca said nothing. "You're running," Gideon repeated. "And you're scared someone will find you. That's why you kept to yourself in Stillwater. Why you worked in a dress shop instead of somewhere more visible. Why you never went to social gatherings or church socials or anywhere people might ask questions. You seem to know a lot about my habits for someone who's never met me. I make it my business to know what happens in towns near my land. And I've heard about you, Miss Morgan, the seamstress who appeared out of nowhere 18 months ago. Young, skilled, keeps to herself, never talks about her past, never receives mail, never has visitors." He paused. "That kind of deliberate invisibility usually means someone's hiding." Rosa made a disapproving sound. "Leave the girl alone. She's had enough interrogation for one day." "I'm not interrogating. I'm trying to help." Gideon's voice softened slightly. "But I can't help if I don't understand the full situation. Miss Morgan, whoever framed you knew your habits. Knew you'd be alone that night. Knew exactly how to make you look guilty. That suggests someone who's been watching you." The coffee turned to acid in Rebecca's stomach. She hadn't considered that. She'd been so focused on the immediate crisis that she hadn't thought about the implications. Someone had been watching her, studying her, planning. "I don't know who would do that," she said quietly. "I don't have enemies in Stillwater. I barely spoke to anyone outside of Harriet and her customers." "What about before Stillwater? Any enemies from your past who might have tracked you here?" Rebecca's silence was answer enough. Gideon's expression hardened. "So, there are people looking for you." "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." He stood, walked to the window. Snow pressed against the glass, turning the world white. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to stay here until we sort this out. I've got men who can investigate the robbery properly. Find out who actually stole from the Rawlings place and who paid to have evidence planted in your room." "I can't stay here." Rebecca stood as well, the blanket falling from her shoulders. "It's not appropriate. People will talk." "People are already talking. They think you're a thief. Can't get much worse." "They'll think I'm your mistress." The word hung in the air between them. Rosa made a choking sound that might have been laughter. Gideon turned from the window. His face was unreadable. Let them think whatever they want. Your reputation in Stillwater is already destroyed. Might as well use that to your advantage. Advantage? How is being thought a criminal and a whore an advantage? Because it makes you untouchable. Gideon crossed back to her. He was so tall she had to tilt her head back to meet his eyes. As long as you're under my protection, no one will dare touch you. The law can't arrest you without going through me. And anyone from your past who comes looking will have to answer to me first. Why? The question burst from Rebecca before she could stop it. Why are you doing this? You don't know me. I could actually be guilty. I could be dangerous. Why risk your reputation? You're standing everything for a stranger. Gideon's jaw tightened. For a long moment he said nothing. Then, I told you, my sister Catherine was hanged for a crime she didn't commit. I was 19 years old and I stood there and watched and did nothing because I was young and powerless and scared. I'm sorry, but that was 8 years ago. This isn't. 6 years ago, a woman named Mary Sullivan came to my ranch looking for work. She was running from her husband who'd beaten her so badly she could barely walk. I gave her a job in the kitchen, paid her fair wages. 3 months later, her husband showed up with the law claiming Mary had stolen from him, demanded I turn her over. Rebecca's breath caught. I refused, Gideon continued. Said if they wanted to take Mary, they'd have to go through me and every man on this ranch. Her husband backed down. The law backed down. And Mary got free. He paused. She's married now to one of my ranch hands. Has 2 children. Happy. So you make a habit of rescuing women. I make a habit of not letting innocent people get destroyed when I have the power to prevent it. Gideon's voice was quiet but intense. I watched Catherine die. I saved Mary. And I'll be damned if I stand by and watch you hang for something you didn't do. Rosa appeared with more coffee. The man has a savior complex, she said matter-of-factly. Also, he's too stubborn to admit when he's wrong, so once he decides to protect someone, nothing short of death will change his mind. That's not helpful, Rosa. Is true. Rosa refilled Rebecca's cup. You accept his help or you freeze to death in the storm. Those are your choices. Choose now. I have dinner to prepare. Rebecca looked between them. Gideon tall and implacable, watching her with those storm-gray eyes. Rosa practical and brisk, already treating Rebecca's presence as a settled fact. She thought about the alternative, returning to Stillwater, facing a trial where the evidence was manufactured and the verdict already decided. Hanging from a rope, while people who'd never known her watched and whispered about justice being served. Or worse, running into the winter with no money, no supplies, no destination. And whoever had framed her would still be out there, still plotting, still dangerous. I'll stay, Rebecca said quietly. But on one condition. Gideon's eyebrow rose. You're in no position to make conditions. Nevertheless, I'm not a charity case. If I stay here, I work. I won't sit idle while you support me like some helpless refugee. I'll earn my keep. A smile flickered across Gideon's face. The first genuine smile she'd seen. It transformed him, made him look younger and less intimidating. Rosa needs help, he said. She's been complaining for months that this house is too big for one woman to manage. You can work for her. Cooking, cleaning, mending. Whatever she needs. I'm an excellent seamstress. I can do alterations repairs. I have 40 men on this ranch who destroy their clothes weekly, Rosa interrupted. If you can sew, you'll have more work than you can handle. Then we have an agreement. Rebecca extended her hand. Room and board in exchange for work, and you investigate the robbery to clear my name. Gideon took her hand. His palm was calloused, warm, solid. Agreement. They shook. His hand lingered in hers a moment longer than necessary. Then he released her and stepped back. Rosa will show you to a room. Get some rest. Tomorrow we'll start figuring out who wants you destroyed and why." Rebecca followed Rosa up a staircase to the second floor. The house was even larger than it appeared from outside. Rosa led her to a room at the far end of the hall, opened the door to reveal a space that was simple but comfortable. A bed with a real mattress and thick quilts, a dresser, a window overlooking the corrals, a small stove in the corner. "There's water in the pitcher," Rosa said. "Chamber pot under the bed. Clean clothes in the dresser. They belong to Mr. Gideon's wife." Rebecca's stomach dropped. His wife? Dead 4 years now. Fever took her. Rosa's voice was matter-of-fact, but her eyes were sad. Mr. Gideon kept her things. Couldn't bear to get rid of them. Maybe now they'll be useful. I couldn't possibly. She would have wanted someone to use them. Anna was practical that way. Rosa moved to the dresser, pulled out a nightgown. She was about your size. Everything should fit. "Rosa, why is Mr. Hart really doing this?" The older woman paused in the doorway. "I told you. He has a savior complex. There's more to it than that." Rosa sighed. "Mr. Gideon lost his sister to injustice, lost his wife to disease, lost his parents to a fire when he was 23. He's had more loss than any man should bear. So when he sees someone who needs saving, he saves them. Because he couldn't save the people he loved." She pulled the door closed behind her, leaving Rebecca alone in a dead woman's room, wearing a dead woman's nightgown, trying to understand the complicated man who just upended her life for the second time in one day. Rebecca moved to the window. Snow still fell thick and relentless. Somewhere out in that storm was Stillwater, Sheriff Brennan and his manufactured evidence, George Henderson and his guilty face, the anonymous witness who'd placed her at the crime scene, and somewhere maybe the people she'd been running from for 2 years. She pressed her forehead against the cold glass and tried not to cry. The next morning arrived gray and still. The storm had passed during the night, leaving behind 3 feet of fresh snow, and a silence so complete it felt like the world had been remade. Rebecca woke disoriented, tangled in unfamiliar quilts, momentarily forgetting where she was. Then memory crashed back. The accusation, the arrest, Gideon Hart's impossible rescue. She dressed quickly in clothes that fit well enough. Anna Hart had been perhaps an inch taller, but the same build. The dress was simple brown wool, practical for work. Rebecca braided her hair, splashed water on her face, and ventured downstairs. The smell of coffee and bacon led her to the kitchen. Rosa was already working, moving between stove and table with practiced efficiency. She glanced up when Rebecca entered. "You're up early. Good. There's coffee on the stove and bread in the box. Help yourself." "Where's Mr. Hart?" "Out with his men. They leave before dawn, come back at sunset. Ranch doesn't run itself." Rosa cracked eggs into a pan. "You want to make yourself useful, you can start by setting the table. We feed the men at noon." "How many men?" "Today, maybe 15. The rest are out at the line camps." Rosa pointed to a cupboard. "Plates in there, forks and knives in the drawer." Rebecca spent the morning learning the rhythm of Rosa's kitchen. It was clear the older woman ran the house with absolute authority. She barked orders, accepted no arguments, and maintained standards that would have impressed an army sergeant. But she was also fair. When Rebecca made mistakes, and she made several, Rosa corrected her without cruelty. And when Rebecca proved she could handle a task, Rosa gave her more responsibility. By noon, Rebecca had helped prepare enough food to feed a small army. Roast beef, potatoes, gravy, biscuits, 3 kinds of vegetables. The men filed in exactly at 12, stamping snow from their boots, hanging coats on pegs by the door. They went silent when they saw Rebecca. "This is Rebecca," Rosa announced, ladling food onto plates. "She works here now. You treat her with respect, or you answer to me and Mr. Gideon. Understood?" A chorus of "yes, ma'am" filled the room. The men ate with the focused intensity of people who'd been working in sub-zero temperatures since before dawn. They were polite to Rebecca, but distant, wary. She supposed word had already spread about the woman Gideon had brought home from Stillwater. Gideon himself arrived halfway through the meal. He filled the doorway, snow dusting his shoulders, his face reddened from cold. His eyes found Rebecca immediately. "Miss Morgan, you settling in?" "Yes, sir." "Good." He moved to the head of the table, accepted a plate from Rosa. "Jack, you and Tom ride into Stillwater this afternoon, quietly. I want to know who the Rawlings place was actually robbed by and who paid the pawnbroker in Copper Falls to describe Miss Morgan." A lean man with a scarred face nodded. "You want us to talk to the pawnbroker? If you can get to him before someone else does, whoever framed Miss Morgan won't want him talking." Gideon cut into his beef. "Take money. Offer him more than he's being paid to lie. What if he won't talk? Make him nervous. Let him know that lying about a woman's life isn't something Heart's Peak takes lightly." Gideon's voice was casual, but there was steel underneath. "Don't hurt him. Just make sure he understands the consequences of maintaining his story." Rebecca's hands tightened on her plate. These men would hurt someone for her, risk themselves for her. All because Gideon had decided she was worth protecting. It should have made her feel grateful. Instead, she felt terrified. Because she knew the truth Gideon didn't. She wasn't innocent. Not completely. She hadn't stolen from the Rawlings place. But she had stolen before. 2 years ago, in another territory, from the man she'd been meant to marry. And if Gideon's investigation uncovered that truth, his protection would evaporate faster than snow in July sun. After the men returned to work, Rebecca helped Rosa clean. The older woman taught her the house's routines, the schedules, the expectations. It was clear Rosa had been running Heart's Peak alone for years and had strong opinions about how things should be done. "Mr. Gideon's mother. She trained me," Rosa said, scrubbing a pot with fierce energy. "She say a well-run house reflects a well-run mind. Everything has its place. Everything has its purpose." She must have been remarkable. She was strict. Fair, but strict. Rosa rinsed the pot, set it to dry. "When she and Mr. Gideon's father died, I think maybe I leave. Find work somewhere else. But Mr. Gideon, he asked me to stay. Say he needs someone to keep him civilized." She smiled slightly. "I stay. Someone has to keep that man from living like Wolf." "How long ago did his parents die?" 12 years now. Fire took their house in the night. Mr. Gideon was 23. He tries to save them, but the smoke, the flames too much." Rosa's hands stilled in the dishwater. "He built this house after. Make it big. Make it strong. Make sure fire can never take it." Home. Rebecca absorbed this. So many losses. Sister parent's wife. No wonder Gideon had developed his savior complex. No wonder he threw himself into protecting strangers. "Rosa, if Mr. Hart discovered I wasn't completely innocent, what would he do?" Rosa turned her dark eyes sharp. "What did you do? I didn't rob the Rawlings place, but I'm not the person he thinks I am either." "None of us are who people think." Rosa dried her hands on her apron. "Mr. Gideon, he's not stupid. He knows you're running from something. He doesn't care what you did before. He cares what you do now." "You don't know what I did. I know you're scared. I know you work hard. I know you say thank you when I give you food, and please when you ask for things." Rosa touched Rebecca's shoulder briefly. "That tells me enough about who you are. The rest is your business." But it wouldn't stay her business. Rebecca knew that. Once Gideon's men started investigating, started asking questions, started pulling threads, eventually they'd uncover her real past. And then, what? She spent the afternoon mending clothes. Rosa hadn't exaggerated about the ranch hands destroying their garments. Rebecca found herself repairing torn seams, replacing buttons, patching knees and elbows. The work was familiar and soothing. Her hands moved automatically while her mind churned. She needed to tell Gideon the truth before he discovered it himself. But how did you tell your rescuer that you were a thief after all? Just not the thief everyone thought you were. Evening came early in winter. By 4 o'clock the sun was setting and the temperature was dropping. Rosa started dinner preparations. Rebecca helped chopping vegetables while Rosa worked on the meat. "You cook before?" Rosa asked. "Some. My mother taught me the basics before she died." "When did she die?" "I was 16. Rosa made a sympathetic sound. "And your father?" "Gone before I was born." Rebecca's knife moved faster through the carrots. "My mother raised me alone. We managed. Until she got sick. Consumption. Took her in 3 months." Rebecca's throat tightened. "After that I went to work in a dress shop. The owner was kind, taught me proper sewing. I had 5 years of decent work and then—" She stopped. She'd said too much already. Rosa didn't push. They worked in silence until boots sounded on the porch. Gideon entered with 3 other men. His face was grim. Rosa said, "Extra places. We've got news." They gathered around the table. Gideon introduced the men. Jack with the scarred face, Tom younger with careful eyes, and Marcus, who looked more like a bank clerk than a ranch hand, but had the kind of sharp intelligence that suggested he was much more. "The pawnbroker's dead," Gideon said without preamble. "Found this morning behind his shop, throat cut, made to look like robbery, but nothing was actually taken." Rebecca's coffee cup slipped from her nerveless fingers. It shattered on the floor. "Easy." Gideon was beside her instantly, his hand on her shoulder. "You're safe here. Someone killed him. They killed him to keep him quiet." "Yes. Which means whoever framed me is willing to murder to protect their plan." Rebecca looked up at Gideon. Her voice shook. "You need to understand what you've gotten into. These aren't just petty criminals. They're dangerous." "I understand." Gideon's voice was calm. Too calm. "Which is exactly why you're staying here, where I can protect you. You can't protect me from people willing to commit murder. Watch me." Gideon returned to his seat. "Marcus did some additional investigating in Stillwater. Tell her what you found." Marcus pulled out a small notebook. "The Rawlings robbery wasn't random. It was extremely targeted. They knew exactly what to take where it was kept when the house would be empty. That requires inside knowledge." "Or someone who works there," Tom added. "The Rawlings have a housekeeper. Woman named Judith Price. She wasn't at the church social that night. Said she was ill." "Convenient?" Jack muttered. "More than convenient," Marcus continued. "Judith Price has a brother, name of Virgil Hayes. He's a drifter known for working with various criminal outfits across the territory. And according to Sarah Brennan, George Henderson was seen paying money to Virgil Hayes the morning of your arrest." The pieces clicked together in Rebecca's mind. So Judith helped her brother rob the Rawlings place. George Henderson paid them to plant evidence in my room. They used the pawnbroker to establish I'd been in Copper Falls selling stolen goods. And then they killed the pawnbroker so he couldn't admit he'd been paid to lie. "That's our working theory," Gideon confirmed. "The question is why? Why go to such elaborate lengths to frame you specifically?" Rebecca's hands clenched under the table. This was it. The moment she had to decide. Trust Gideon with the truth, or maintain her lies and pray he never discovered them. She took a breath. "Because someone from my past found me, and they want me destroyed." The room went silent. "Who?" Gideon's voice was very quiet. "His name is Richard Thornton. He's a businessman from Chicago, very wealthy, very powerful." Rebecca forced the words out. 2 years ago, I was engaged to marry his son Charles. The wedding was planned, the invitations sent. And then I discovered what kind of man Charles really was. What kind of man? The kind who hits women, the kind who enjoys it. Rebecca's voice went flat. He was charming in public. In private, he was a monster. I saw him beat a servant unconscious for spilling wine. Saw him break his sister's arm because she spoke against him. And I realized if I married him, I'd be his property, his to hurt whenever he pleased. Gideon's face had gone hard as granite. So I ran, Rebecca continued. 3 days before the wedding, I took what I could carry and disappeared. Charles was furious. His father was more furious. I'd humiliated them publicly, made them look foolish. Richard Thornton swore he'd find me, make me pay for embarrassing his family. And you think he found you? Marcus said quietly. I think he's been looking for 2 years. I think he finally traced me to Stillwater. And I think he paid George Henderson and Virgil Hayes to destroy me. Rebecca met Gideon's eyes. I didn't steal from the Rawlings place, but I did steal from the Thorntons. I took $500 from Charles's desk, money I'd need to disappear, money I had no right to take. Money you needed to save your life, Gideon said. It was still stealing. It was survival. Gideon's voice was harsh. And if Richard Thornton thinks he can use it to have you hanged, he's got another thing coming. You don't understand. The Thorntons are powerful. They have connections everywhere. Money influence judges in their pocket. If Richard wants me dead, I'll end up dead. Not while you're under my protection. Gideon began pacing. Marcus sent telegrams. I want to know everything about Richard and Charles Thornton. Business dealings, legal troubles, enemies, anything we can use. Tom talked to the sheriff. Make it clear that if any strangers come asking about Miss Morgan, he's to notify us immediately. And what about me? Rebecca asked. I just sit here and wait while you fight my battles. Gideon stopped pacing, looked at her. You stay alive. That's your job. Stay alive and let me handle the rest. I won't hide behind you. You will if I say you will. His voice brooked no argument. Miss Morgan, these people killed a man to silence him. They won't hesitate to kill you if they get the chance. You want to be useful. Help Rosa, mend clothes, cook meals, and stay inside this house where I know you're safe. Rebecca wanted to argue, wanted to insist on her independence, but she saw the fear beneath Gideon's controlled exterior, the same fear she'd seen when he talked about his sister Catherine. He couldn't save Catherine. He'd lost Anna, he'd lost his parents, and he was terrified of losing Rebecca too, even though he barely knew her, even though she'd lied to him about who she was. All right, Rebecca said quietly. I'll stay inside, for now. Thank you. The men dispersed to their tasks. Rosa began serving dinner. Gideon sat across from Rebecca, his food untouched, his eyes distant. You're thinking about your sister, Rebecca said. He didn't deny it. Catherine stole a loaf of bread because she was starving. The baker accused her of stealing jewelry too, planted it in her room, convinced the judge she was a career criminal. His jaw clenched. She was 17 years old, and they hanged her because the baker wanted to make an example. I'm sorry. Don't be sorry. Be alive. Gideon finally looked at her. That's all I ask, Miss Morgan. Whatever happens, stay alive. Rebecca nodded, but she knew something Gideon didn't. Richard Thornton never gave up, never forgave. And if he'd found her here, then Stillwater had just been the opening move. The real game hadn't even started yet. The telegram arrived 3 days later during breakfast. Marcus brought it to the table where Gideon sat reviewing supply ledgers, while Rebecca helped Rosa clear dishes. The room went quiet when Marcus entered, snow still clinging to his coat. From Chicago, Marcus said, handing the folded paper to Gideon. You're not going to like it. Gideon read in silence. Rebecca watched his face harden with each line. Finally, he looked up at her. Richard Thornton left Chicago 2 weeks ago, destination listed as Montana Territory. He's traveling with his son Charles and 3 hired men. Rebecca's hands went numb. The plate she was holding slipped, but Rosa caught it before it fell. How far behind us? Gideon asked Marcus. Could be here any day, maybe already in the territory. Then we moved to the next phase. Gideon began pacing. Tom, I want guards posted. 2 men on watch at all times, day and night. No one approaches this ranch without us knowing. Jack ride to every neighboring spread. Tell them we're expecting trouble and to report any strangers asking questions. And me, Rebecca's voice came out steadier than she felt. What do I do? You stay close to the house. You don't go outside alone. You don't go near windows after dark. Gideon stopped in front of her. And you trust me to handle this. You keep saying that. Trust you let you handle it. But these are my demons, Gideon. My past. You shouldn't have to fight my battles. Too late. I'm already fighting them. His voice softened slightly. Rebecca, you need to understand something. Richard Thornton comes here, makes demands, threatens violence. He's not just threatening you. He's threatening my ranch, my authority, my people. That makes it my fight too. He'll have the law on his side. I'm a thief. He can prove it. You took money from a man who would have killed you eventually. That's not theft. That's self-preservation. The law won't see it that way. Then the law can go to hell. Gideon turned to Marcus. What else did you find? Marcus consulted his notebook. Richard Thornton's business dealings aren't exactly clean. Multiple complaints of intimidation, several lawsuits for breach of contract, 2 suspicious fires at competitor warehouses. Nothing proven in court, but the pattern's clear. He's not above using violence to get what he wants. What about the son? Charles Thornton has a worse reputation. 3 women filed assault complaints against him. All 3 withdrew the complaints after receiving large cash settlements. He was asked to leave 2 gentlemen's clubs for behavior toward female staff. And according to my source in Chicago, there's a standing arrangement with local police to handle any incidents involving Charles quietly. Rebecca felt bile rise in her throat. She'd escaped that life. Escaped becoming another woman who accepted money to stay silent about broken bones and bruised flesh. So they're coming here expecting to intimidate a woman into submission, Gideon said. His voice had gone cold. They're going to be disappointed. You can't fight them all, Rebecca protested. Richard Thornton has money connections, hired guns. You're one man. I'm one man with 40 ranch hands who are loyal, well-armed, and don't take kindly to strangers threatening women on our land. Gideon crossed to the window, looked out at the snow-covered expanse. This is Montana territory, not Chicago. Out here, money and connections only matter if the people with them are tough enough to back them up. And I'm betting Richard Thornton isn't used to people who fight back. Rosa appeared at Rebecca's elbow with coffee. Drink, she commanded quietly. You're pale as milk. Rebecca took the cup with shaking hands. I should leave, before they get here. If I'm gone, there's nothing for them to find. And where would you go? Gideon turned from the window. Into winter, with no money, no supplies, no destination. You'd be dead in 3 days. Better dead than dragged back to Charles Thornton. Those aren't your only options. Gideon moved closer. You can stay here and let me protect you. You can trust that I meant what I said when I promised you safety. Why? The question burst from Rebecca. Why are you doing this? I lied to you. Didn't tell you the whole truth about who I was or what I'd done. You should be angry. Should be throwing me out. Instead, you're preparing to go to war with one of the most powerful families in Chicago. Why? Gideon was quiet for a long moment. The kitchen sounds faded. Rosa and Marcus had slipped away, giving them privacy. Outside wind rattled the windows. Because when I was 19 years old, Gideon finally said, I stood in a town square and watched my sister hang for a crime she didn't commit. I stood there and did nothing because I was young and scared and powerless. And for 17 years, I've lived with that memory, that failure. He moved closer until he was standing directly in front of her. I can't save Catherine. Can't bring her back or undo what happened. But I can save you. And I will. Not because you're perfect, or because you told me everything from the start, but because you deserve a chance to live free from fear. Free from men who think they own you because they have money and power. Rebecca's eyes burned. You barely know me. I know enough. I know you work hard without complaint. I know you say please and thank you even when you're terrified. I know you tried to leave rather than bring danger to people who'd helped you." His voice dropped. "I know you're braver than you think you are, and I know I'm not letting Richard Thornton take you." The intensity in his gray eyes made Rebecca's breath catch. This wasn't just about saving a stranger anymore. Something had shifted between them over the past 3 days. Something neither of them had acknowledged, but both felt. "I'm scared," Rebecca whispered. "I know. So am I." Gideon's hand came up, hesitated, then gently touched her shoulder. "But we're going to be scared together. And together, we're going to win." Rebecca wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that this time, finally someone would actually protect her instead of using her or hurting her or abandoning her when things got difficult. But 2 years of running had taught her not to trust easily. "What's your plan?" she asked. "First, we fortify. Make sure the ranch is secure and everyone knows what to do if Thornton shows up. Second, we gather evidence. Everything we can find about Richard and Charles Thornton's illegal activities. Third, we make it clear that coming after you means going through me and every man on this ranch. And if that's not enough, then we get creative." A hint of a smile touched Gideon's mouth. "I've been ranching in Montana Territory for 12 years. I know every judge, every marshal, every politician within 200 miles. And I know things about most of them that they'd prefer stayed private. If Richard Thornton wants to play the influence game, he's going to discover I'm better at it than he expects." Rebecca absorbed this. She'd been so focused on Richard's power that she'd forgotten Gideon had power too. Different power, maybe. Earned through years of fair dealing and hard work, rather than bought with money and intimidation. But power nonetheless. "All right," she said. "I'll stay. I'll trust you. But Gideon, if this goes wrong, if they manage to take me, you have to promise you won't do anything stupid trying to get me back." "Can't promise that." "Gideon, I can't." His hand tightened on her shoulder. "If they take you, I'm coming for you. That's not negotiable." Before Rebecca could respond, boots thundered on the porch. Tom burst through the door, his face flushed with cold and urgency. "We got visitors. 3 men just rode up to the gate. Well-dressed, expensive horses acting like they own the place." "Thornton," Gideon said. He didn't sound surprised. "How many men with him?" "Just 3 total, but they're armed." "So are we." Gideon turned to Rebecca. "Go upstairs. Stay in your room. Don't come down no matter what you hear." "I'm not hiding while you—" "You're not hiding. You're being smart." His voice went hard. "Rebecca, if Richard Thornton sees your face, sees your fear, he wins. The best way to fight him right now is to make him realize you're not some helpless woman he can intimidate. You're under my protection. That means he doesn't get to see you until I allow it. He'll demand to see me. And I'll refuse. Let him rage. Let him threaten. Let him show everyone exactly what kind of man he is." Gideon's eyes held hers. "Trust me." Rebecca nodded slowly. Rosa appeared and guided her toward the stairs. As Rebecca climbed, she heard Gideon issuing orders in that calm, authoritative voice that brooked no argument. "Marcus, get every man we've got armed and visible. I want Thornton to see exactly what he's dealing with. Tom, you stand behind me. Don't speak unless I tell you. Jack, position yourself where you can hear everything. I want witnesses to whatever happens next." Rebecca reached her room and moved to the window. From this angle, she could see the front gate. 3 men sat on horseback in the snow. Even from this distance, she recognized them. Richard Thornton was older than she remembered. He'd aged in the 2 years since she'd seen him, his hair gone completely gray, deep lines carved into his face. But he sat his horse with the same arrogant posture, the same assumption that the world would bend to his will. Beside him was Charles, still handsome in the conventional sense, with perfect features and expensive clothes. But Rebecca could see the cruelty in the set of his mouth, the violence in how his hands gripped the reins. The third man she didn't recognize. He was younger, lean, with the watchful eyes of someone accustomed to violence. A hired gun, probably. The kind of man Richard employed when intimidation required muscle. She watched as Gideon walked out to meet them. He moved with deliberate calm, flanked by Tom and 4 other ranch hands. They were all armed. Not threatening, just making a statement. Rebecca couldn't hear the conversation from her window, but she could read body language. Richard's initial confidence when he started speaking. The way that confidence faltered when he realized Gideon wasn't intimidated. Charles's growing agitation, his horse shifting under him as he gestured angrily. And Gideon. Absolutely still. Absolutely controlled. A mountain that weather couldn't move. The confrontation lasted perhaps 10 minutes. Then Gideon said something final, turned his back, and walked away. The ultimate dismissal. Richard's face went purple even from this distance. He shouted something. Gideon didn't turn around. Charles started to dismount. The hired gun put a hand on his arm, stopping him. Smart man. Even Charles Thornton wasn't stupid enough to start a fight when outnumbered 6-1. They rode away. But the promise in Richard's posture was clear. This wasn't over. Rebecca was still at the window when Gideon entered her room 20 minutes later. He didn't knock. Just opened the door and stood there, snow melting on his shoulders, his face unreadable. "Tell me," Rebecca said. "He demanded I turn you over. Said you were a thief who'd stolen from his family, and he had every right to take you back to Chicago for justice. What did you say?" "I said I didn't care what happened in Chicago. Here you're under my protection. If he has legal complaints, he can file them with the territorial marshal. Until then, he's to stay off my land." "He won't accept that." "I know." Gideon moved to the window, stood beside her. "He threatened to go to the sheriff. I told him the sheriff already knows the situation and knows that the evidence against you in Stillwater was manufactured. He threatened to bring federal marshals. I told him I welcome any legitimate investigation because it'll prove you're innocent." "What did Charles say?" Gideon's jaw tightened. "Charles said things I won't repeat. Threats about what he'd do to you when he got you back. How he'd teach you the consequences of humiliating him." Rebecca felt cold despite the stove warming the room. "So he's exactly as I described?" "Worse. He's used to women being terrified of him. Used to that fear giving him power." Gideon turned to look at her. "But you're not his anymore, Rebecca. You're not anyone's property. And if Charles Thornton tries to touch you, he'll discover Montana men have different ideas about how women should be treated. You can't watch me every moment. No, but 40 men can." Gideon crossed to the door, pulled it open. "Jack." The scarred ranch hand appeared immediately. "Boss. From now until I say otherwise, Miss Morgan doesn't go anywhere without an escort. She needs to go to the barn, someone goes with her. She needs to walk to the spring house, someone's beside her. She steps outside for fresh air, someone's watching." "Understood." "And Jack, if anyone tries to approach her without permission, you stop them. I don't care who they are or what authority they claim. You stop them." "With pleasure." Jack nodded to Rebecca. "Ma'am, you got nothing to worry about. We take care of our own." After Jack left, Rebecca turned to Gideon. "Your men don't know me. Why would they risk themselves?" "Because I asked them to. And because they're good men who don't like bullies." Gideon moved to the stove, added wood from the box beside it. "Also, word spread about what happened in Stillwater, how you were framed, how you've been working hard here without complaint. Rosa speaks highly of you, and the men respect Rosa's judgment more than mine most days. I don't deserve this." "Stop saying that." Gideon's voice sharpened. "You deserve safety. You deserve a chance to build a life without fear. You deserve people who'll stand with you instead of abandoning you." He paused. "Why is that so hard for you to accept?" Rebecca looked away. "Because everyone I've ever trusted has eventually hurt me or left me. My mother died. The dress shop owner who was kind to me sold her business and moved away without telling me. And Charles," her voice broke. "Charles was charming for 6 months. Made me believe I mattered to him. Then the mask came off, and I saw what he really was. I'm not Charles. I know. But my brain doesn't know. My brain says every time I trust someone I get hurt. So why would this time be different? Gideon was quiet for a long moment. Then he crossed the room and with careful deliberation took both her hands in his. Look at me. Rebecca lifted her eyes to his. I can't promise I'll never hurt you, Gideon said. I'm human. I'll make mistakes, say the wrong thing, do something thoughtless. But I can promise that I'll never deliberately betray you, never abandon you when things get hard, never use your trust against you. His hands tightened on hers. And I can promise that as long as I'm breathing, Richard and Charles Thornton don't get to touch you. That's not a maybe. That's a fact. Rebecca wanted to pull away, wanted to maintain the emotional distance that had kept her safe for 2 years. But something in Gideon's eyes stopped her. An absolute certainty, a strength she could lean on without it collapsing. I don't know how to do this, she whispered. How to let someone protect me. How to trust when trust has always led to pain. One day at a time, one choice at a time. Gideon's thumb brushed across her knuckles. Right now, you choose to stay here instead of running. Tomorrow, you choose to accept help instead of hiding. The day after, maybe you choose to believe that I mean what I say. Small choices, Rebecca. That's all trust is. Lots of small choices that eventually add up to something solid. What if I make the wrong choice? Then we deal with it, together. He released one of her hands, but kept holding the other. Come downstairs. Rosa's making stew, and the men are gathering for dinner. Show Richard Thornton that you're not locked in a tower. You're living your life, with people who care about you. Rebecca let him lead her downstairs. The main room was full of ranch hands, their voices loud and rough, but not unkind. They made space for her at the table without being asked, passed her food, included her in their conversations about horses and cattle, and which line camp had the worst roof leak. It was so normal, so ordinary, so utterly unlike the rigid formal dinners she'd endured at the Thornton house, where every word was calculated and every gesture judged. Miss Rebecca, one of the younger hands said. He couldn't have been more than 20 with a sunburned face and shy smile. Rosa says you're an excellent seamstress. I got a shirt that's coming apart at the seams. Would you have time to fix it? Of course. Bring it to the kitchen tomorrow. I got 2 pairs of trousers need patching. Another man offered. 3 shirts here. My coat's missing buttons. Rosa laughed. See, I told you. These men destroy everything. You'll be busy from now until spring. Rebecca smiled. An actual smile that felt strange on her face after days of fear and tension. I don't mind. It's good to feel useful. You are useful, Gideon said quietly, his voice pitched for her ears alone. You're more than useful. You're part of this place now. Part of us. The warmth in his voice made Rebecca's chest ache. She wanted to believe him, wanted to accept that she'd finally found somewhere she belonged. But the fear Richard and Charles inspired didn't fade easily. They were out there somewhere, planning, plotting, waiting for an opportunity. And Rebecca knew men like Richard Thornton didn't give up. They waited, they watched, and they struck when you least expected it. After dinner, Rebecca helped Rosa clean while the men dispersed to evening chores. The kitchen was warm and steamy, the work familiar and soothing. You did good today, Rosa said, scrubbing a pot. With Mr. Gideon, with the men. You're finding your feet. I'm terrified. Of course you are. Fear is smart when there are wolves outside. Rosa rinsed the pot, set it to dry. But you're not alone anymore. You have Pack now. And Pack protects its own. Rosa, can I ask you something? Always. Why does Gideon care so much? I understand about his sister. But this feels like more than just guilt over something that happened 17 years ago. Rosa was quiet, her hands stilling in the dishwater. Finally, she said, Mr. Gideon's wife Anna. She was sick for a long time before she died. Fever that wouldn't break, getting weaker every day. He tried everything. Brought doctors from Denver, from Salt Lake City, even one from San Francisco. Nothing worked. That must have been terrible. Worst part was watching him watch her die, knowing he couldn't save her no matter what he did. That helplessness, it broke something in him. Rosa pulled her hands from the water, dried them slowly. After Anna died, Mr. Gideon changed, became harder, colder, threw himself into work. Then Mary Sullivan showed up running from her husband, and Mr. Gideon saw a chance to save someone, to not be helpless. So I'm another Mary Sullivan. No. Rosa turned to face her. Mary, he helped because it was right thing. You, he helps because he sees something in you that matters to him, something more than duty. Rebecca's breath caught. What do you mean? I mean the way he looks at you is not the way he looked at Mary. I mean he touches your shoulder when he thinks no one's watching. I mean he smiles more in 3 days than he has in 3 years. Rosa's dark eyes were knowing. You're not just someone to save girl. You're someone he's starting to care about. Maybe more than care about. That's impossible. We barely know each other. Hearts don't run on schedules. They feel what they feel. Rosa returned to the dishes. Question is, what do you feel? Rebecca didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because she didn't know. Fear and gratitude were tangled up with something else. Something that made her aware of where Gideon was in every room. Something that made his voice calm the panic in her chest. Something that felt dangerously close to the feelings she'd once had for Charles before she'd discovered his true nature. And that terrified her more than Richard and Charles combined. Because trusting Gideon with her safety was one thing. Trusting him with her heart was something else entirely. That night, Rebecca lay awake in Anna Hart's room, listening to the wind howl outside. She thought about Gideon downstairs, probably still working on his ledgers, refusing to sleep until he'd finished whatever task he'd set himself. She thought about his hands holding hers, the warmth in his eyes, the absolute certainty when he promised protection. She thought about Richard and Charles out there in the darkness planning their next move. And she thought about Rosa's words. You're not just someone to save. Rebecca pulled the quilts tighter and tried to ignore the warmth spreading through her chest. Tried to ignore the dangerous hope that maybe, just maybe, she'd finally found somewhere she could stop running. But hope was dangerous. Hope made you vulnerable. And Rebecca had learned that vulnerability led to pain. Better to stay guarded, stay careful, accept Gideon's protection, but not his heart, even if her own heart was starting to have other ideas. Outside, the wind carried snow against the windows. Winter had months left to run, and somewhere in that winter, a reckoning was coming. Rebecca just hoped that when it arrived, she'd be strong enough to face it without destroying everything she was beginning to build. The attack came 6 days later, just before dawn, when the world was caught between darkness and light. Rebecca woke to shouting. Men's voices raised in alarm boots, thundering on wood, the unmistakable sound of guns being cocked. She threw off the quilts and ran to the window. Fire. The barn was burning. She dressed in seconds, her hands shaking so badly she could barely fasten the buttons. By the time she reached the stairs, Gideon was already moving through the house, his voice cutting through the chaos. Tom, get every man on the fire line. Marcus, check the other buildings. Jack with me. Gideon, what's happening? Rebecca caught his arm as he passed. Thornton. Has to be. His face was grim. Stay in the house. Rosa's already barring the doors. The animals. We're getting them out. But Rebecca, you stay inside. This could be a diversion. He gripped her shoulders hard. Promise me. I promise. He kissed her forehead quick and fierce, then was gone into the pre-dawn darkness. Rebecca stood frozen, her skin burning where his lips had touched. That hadn't been a protective gesture. That had been something else entirely. Rosa appeared, pulling her away from the door. Come. We watch from upstairs where we see everything." From the second-floor window, Rebecca could see the full scope of the disaster. The barn was fully engulfed, flames reaching toward the sky like grasping fingers. Men ran in organized chaos, some forming bucket lines from the well, others driving terrified horses and cattle away from the blaze. Gideon was everywhere, directing, helping, his voice carrying above the roar of flames. He grabbed a horse's bridle when the animal reared in panic, spoke low and calm until it settled enough to be led to safety. He pulled a young ranch hand back when a beam collapsed, probably saving the boy's life. "He's good in crisis," Rosa said quietly. "Always has been. Gets calm when everyone else panics." "How did the fire start?" "That's the question." Rosa's eyes were sharp. "Barn don't just catch fire in winter. Snow everywhere, nothing to spark." Rebecca's stomach dropped. "It was set deliberately." "Of course it was. Mr. Thornton, he strikes where it hurts. Barn full of feed equipment, animals worth thousands. Burn it, you damage the ranch. Make Mr. Gideon weak." But Gideon didn't look weak. He looked furious and focused and absolutely in control. The fire burned for 2 hours before the men got it contained. By then, the barn was destroyed, and the eastern sky was lightening with real dawn. Rebecca watched as Gideon gathered his men. Even from this distance, she could see the set of his jaw, the tension in his shoulders. He was saying something, his gestures sharp and definitive. Several men nodded and dispersed at a run. "They're going hunting," Rosa said with satisfaction. "Men who set fires leave tracks. Mr. Gideon's men, they're good trackers." "What if Thornton's men are still out there? What if this is a trap?" "Then they learn Heart's Peak men don't scare easy." Rebecca paced the room, unable to stand still. The kiss kept replaying in her mind. Not the fire, not the danger, but that moment when Gideon had pressed his lips to her forehead, like she was something precious he couldn't bear to lose. When had this stopped being about protection? When had it become personal? And why did her heart race every time she thought about seeing him again? Gideon didn't return to the house until mid-morning. When he finally entered through the kitchen door, he was covered in soot and ash, his face streaked with smoke stains, his hands raw from handling rope and fighting fire. Rebecca met him with a basin of warm water and clean cloths. She didn't speak, just gestured for him to sit. He obeyed without argument, too exhausted to protest. She cleaned his face first, gentle swipes removing the worst of the grime. His eyes closed as she worked. This close, she could see the toll the night had taken. The lines of exhaustion around his mouth, the weariness in every line of his body. "Did you find them?" she asked softly. Tracks led straight toward Stillwater. 3 horses riding hard. They set the fire and ran. "Can you prove it was Thornton's men?" "Don't need to prove it. I know it was." Gideon's eyes opened, met hers. This was a message. "He can't get to you directly, so he'll destroy everything around you. Make me regret protecting you." "Then maybe I should—" "Don't." His hand caught her wrist, stopping her mid-motion with the cloth. "Don't you dare suggest leaving. That's exactly what he wants. He wants you scared and alone and running. We're not giving him that. He burned your barn, Gideon, destroyed your property, hurt your ranch because of me. Because of him. Because he's a bully who thinks violence and intimidation will break people." Gideon's grip tightened. "I've dealt with bullies before. They're all the same. Push back hard enough and they crumble." "What if he doesn't crumble? What if he keeps escalating?" "Then so do I." Gideon released her wrist, stood. "Marcus rode to the territorial marshal this morning. We're filing formal complaints about the fire, about the attempted kidnapping, about everything. And Tom's talking to every rancher within 50 miles. By tonight, every spread in this territory will know that Richard Thornton is trying to intimidate Heart's Peak. No one's going to take kindly to that. You're building an alliance. I'm reminding people that we take care of our own out here. Thornton thinks he can import Chicago tactics to Montana." Gideon's smile was cold. "He's about to learn different." Rebecca returned to cleaning his hands, washing away soot and blood from torn skin. "You're hurt." "Rope burn, nothing serious." "Let me bandage it anyway." She worked in silence, wrapping clean cloth around his palms. His hands were large and calloused strong from years of work. Hands that had pulled her onto a horse and promised protection. Hands that had held hers when she was terrified. Hands that had touched her forehead this morning with something that felt dangerously like tenderness. "Rebecca." His voice was low. She looked up. "This morning, when I kissed you, I shouldn't have done that without asking." Her heart hammered. "It was just you were worried. It didn't mean anything." "It meant something to me." Gideon's gray eyes held hers. "I'm not good with words. I'm better with actions. And that action that was me saying, you matter. Not as someone I'm protecting. As someone I—" He stopped, seeming to struggle with the words. "Someone you what?" "Someone I care about." The words came out rough. "Someone who's become important to me in ways I didn't expect and probably shouldn't feel given we've only known each other a week. But I've never been good at doing things the proper way." Rebecca's hand stilled on his. "Gideon, I don't know how to—" "You don't have to say anything. I'm not asking for promises or declarations. I just needed you to know that keeping you safe isn't just duty anymore. It's personal." He stood, putting distance between them. "And that means I'm going to fight harder, push back more, because the thought of Thornton getting his hands on you makes me—" He didn't finish, but Rebecca saw the violence in his eyes, the barely controlled rage of a man imagining someone he cared about being hurt. "I'm scared," she whispered. "Of Thornton. Of this. Of you. Of feeling things I swore I'd never feel again after Charles." Gideon turned. "I'm not Charles." "I know. That's what scares me most." Rebecca wrapped her arms around herself. "Because if you were cruel or manipulative or violent, I could keep my walls up. But you're kind and protective, and you look at me like I matter, and that makes me want to trust you. Want to believe this is real. And trusting people has only ever brought me pain." "Then don't trust me yet." Gideon moved closer, not touching, just present. "Take your time. Watch me. See if my actions match my words. See if I'm the kind of man worth trusting. And if I'm not, tell me and I'll step back. You wouldn't be angry. I'd be disappointed, but I'd understand." His voice softened. "Rebecca, I've lost too many people I cared about to risk losing another by pushing too hard or demanding too much. Whatever happens between us, it happens at your pace, on your terms. All I ask is that you don't leave because you're scared. Stay scared if you need to, but stay." The raw honesty in his voice undid something in Rebecca's chest. She'd spent 2 years expecting cruelty and finding none, expecting abandonment and finding protection instead. And now Gideon was offering her something even more terrifying than violence. He was offering her a choice, real choice without manipulation or pressure or hidden costs. "I'll stay," she said, "not just because I have nowhere else to go, but because I want to see if this, if us is real." The smile that crossed Gideon's face was worth every moment of fear. "That's all I need." Rosa burst through the door before either of them could say more. "Mr. Gideon Ryder's coming, 6 of them. Sheriff Brennan leading." Gideon's expression hardened instantly. "Armed?" "Yes, and they got Mr. Thornton with them." Rebecca's blood went cold. "He's coming here with the law. Apparently thinks the sheriff will do his dirty work." Gideon was already moving, checking his gun, his face settling into that calm, dangerous expression Rebecca had learned meant he was preparing for battle. "Rosa, keep Rebecca inside. Bar the doors after I leave. I'm not hiding while—" "You're not hiding. You're being strategic." Gideon stopped at the door, looked back at her. "Thornton wants to see you afraid. Wants to see you cowering. The best weapon we have right now is your absence. Let him rage at empty air." He was right. Rebecca knew he was right. But every instinct screamed at her to run, to fight, to do something other than stand still while others fought her battles. Gideon seemed to read her thoughts. Being brave isn't always about fighting. Sometimes it's about trusting others to fight for you. Then he was gone. Rosa immediately moved to bar the door, then pulled Rebecca back to the upstairs window, where they could observe without being seen. Sheriff Brennan sat his horse uneasily, clearly uncomfortable with his role in this confrontation. Richard Thornton looked triumphant, his expensive coat making him stand out among the working men. Charles was there too, his handsome face twisted with anticipation. And beside them were three men Rebecca didn't recognize. Hard men with cold eyes, hands resting casually on their guns. The hired violence Richard always employed when intimidation required muscle. Gideon walked out alone to meet them. Marcus and Jack flanked him at a distance, guns visible, but not drawn. A dozen other ranch hands emerged from various buildings, all armed, all watching. "Sheriff Brennan?" Gideon's voice carried in the cold air. "You're a long way from Stillwater." "Mr. Hart." The sheriff looked miserable. "I got a situation here. Mr. Thornton's filed official complaints. Says you're harboring a fugitive. Woman named Rebecca Morgan, who stole money and property from his family in Chicago. Miss Morgan is under my protection, pending investigation into the false charges filed against her in Stillwater." "False charges!" Richard Thornton's voice dripped contempt. "That woman stole $500 from my son, absconded 3 days before their wedding. That's theft and breach of contract." "Your son beat women," Gideon said flatly. "Miss Morgan left to save her life." "That's slander." Charles urged his horse forward. "You'll retract that statement or what?" Gideon's voice went cold. "You'll do what exactly? Add me to the list of people you've assaulted. I should warn you I hit back." "Gentlemen, please." Sheriff Brennan held up a hand. "Mr. Thornton, you got legal papers." Richard pulled documents from his coat. Sworn affidavit from Charles attesting to the theft. Statement from our housekeeper confirming the missing money. Wire from Chicago police confirming we filed charges. Everything legal and proper. "All forged or coerced," Gideon said. "Sheriff, you going to take the word of a man who burned my barn last night?" "I didn't burn anything." Richard's face flushed. "You got no proof." "I got tracks leading straight toward the hotel where you're staying. I got witnesses who saw 3 men riding hard from the direction of my ranch at dawn. And I got a marshal's deputy on his way here right now to investigate arson and attempted murder." "Attempted murder?" The sheriff looked alarmed. "Mr. Hart, that's a serious accusation. 4 men were in that barn when it caught fire. They got out because they're trained for emergencies. Someone less prepared could have died." Gideon's voice was hard. "That fire was set deliberately to cause maximum damage. To intimidate me into abandoning someone under my protection. These are wild accusations from a man trying to avoid answering for his crimes," Richard snapped. "Sheriff, your duty is clear. I have legal documentation. He has conspiracy theories. Arrest the woman and let's be done with this." Sheriff Brennan looked between them, clearly torn. Rebecca could see the calculation in his eyes. Richard Thornton had money and influence, but Gideon Hart was local respected and currently surrounded by 40 armed men. "Mr. Hart," the sheriff said slowly, "I don't want trouble, but I got to follow the law. If Mr. Thornton has legal papers, then file them with the territorial court and we'll handle this properly, with lawyers and judges and due process." Gideon crossed his arms. "But you're not taking Miss Morgan anywhere based on documents that could be forged. Not without a warrant from a territorial judge." "We don't need a warrant for a known thief," Charles snarled. "You need a warrant to enter my property and remove someone under my protection. That's Montana law, Sheriff. You know it as well as I do." The sheriff nodded reluctantly. "He's right, Mr. Thornton. Without a proper warrant, I can't just, then get a warrant." Richard's voice was ice. "We'll ride to the nearest territorial judge and return with proper documentation. But make no mistake, Sheriff. If you obstruct justice, if you allow Hart to harbor a criminal, I'll have your badge and your career. No one's threatening anyone. Gideon's voice cut through the tension. Sheriff, you do your job properly and there won't be problems. But if you show up here with false warrants or manufactured evidence, like what happened in Stillwater, you'll answer to every rancher in this territory. It was a clear line in the sand. The sheriff could follow Richard's money, or he could maintain his integrity and position in the community. Not much of a choice, really. I'll look into the matter properly, Sheriff Brennan said finally. If there's cause for a warrant, I'll get one from Judge Morrison in Helena. But Mr. Thornton, I'll also be investigating that barn fire. If evidence points to your involvement, you'll face charges. Richard's face went purple. This is outrageous. I'm being treated like a criminal, while the actual criminal hides behind this man's protection. She's not hiding, Gideon said quietly. She's being protected from a man who thinks money and violence make him above the law. There's a difference. Charles spurred his horse forward, rage overcoming caution. You arrogant! The shot rang out before he could finish. Not aimed at anyone, just fired into the air. But every man's hand went to their guns. The tension ratcheted up instantly, from confrontation to the edge of violence. Jack had fired. He stood with his rifle raised, his scarred face expressionless. Apologies. Gun went off accidental-like. These things happen when folks get too excited. The message was clear. Make a move, and the next shot wouldn't be accidental. Charles paled. Even he wasn't stupid enough to push further when surrounded and outgunned. We're done here, Gideon said. Sheriff, you know where to find me when you have legitimate business. Mr. Thornton, you and your son are no longer welcome on Hart's Peak land. If I see you here again without the law, I'll treat you as hostile trespassers. That clear? Richard's eyes burned with hate. This isn't over. No, it's not. But the next move is yours. Make it legal or don't make it at all. Gideon turned his back, the ultimate dismissal. Tom, see them off the property. Rebecca watched as the group rode away, Richard and Charles' backs rigid with fury. Only when they disappeared from view did she allow herself to breathe. Rosa touched her shoulder. It's getting worse. I know. Mr. Gideon, he won't back down. Not ever. Not for anyone. I know that too. Rebecca pressed her hand to the cold window glass. Rosa, what if people get hurt because of me? What if Gideon? Then we deal with it. Rosa's voice was firm. But you don't leave. You don't run. You don't give those bastards what they want. Understand? Rebecca nodded, though her throat was tight. Gideon didn't come back to the house until evening. When he finally entered, his face was drawn with exhaustion and something darker. Worry, maybe. Or fear. They'll get their warrant, he said without preamble. Thornton has enough money to buy Judge Morrison's cooperation. We have maybe 3 days before they return with legal authority to take you. Rebecca's legs went weak. Rosa guided her to a chair. 3 days, Rebecca whispered. 3 days to build our case. Marcus is gathering every piece of evidence about the Thorntons' illegal activities. Tom's talking to women Charles assaulted, seeing if any will testify. And I've sent word to a lawyer I know in Helena. Best criminal defense attorney in the territory. That costs money I don't have. I have it, and I'm spending it. Gideon crouched in front of her chair, took her hands. Rebecca, listen to me. In 3 days they'll come back with papers that say they can take you. But papers don't mean anything if we can prove those papers are based on lies. If we can show Judge Morrison evidence of what Charles really is, what Richard's business practices really involve, the judge might reconsider. Might. It's better than nothing. His hands tightened on hers. And if the legal route fails, we have other options. What other options? Gideon's eyes went hard. You let me worry about that. Gideon, you can't. I can. I will. He stood, pulled her up with him. Rebecca, I need you to promise me something. Yeah. What? If they come and it looks like they're going to take you, if everything legal fails and they try to force the issue, you do exactly what I tell you. No arguments, no hesitation. You trust me completely." Fear crawled up Rebecca's spine. "What are you planning?" "Insurance, backup plans. Things I hope we won't need, but I'm preparing anyway." He cupped her face in his hands. "Promise me." "I promise." "Good." He kissed her forehead again, lingering this time. When he pulled back, his eyes held hers. "I won't let them take you. Whatever it costs, whatever I have to do, I won't let them take you." The absolute conviction in his voice should have reassured her. Instead, it terrified her. Because Rebecca recognized that tone. She'd heard it in Charles's voice when he talked about owning things, about controlling things, about never letting go of what belonged to him. "Gideon." Her voice shook. "I'm not something to possess. I can't be another thing you save to make up for the people you couldn't save." He flinched like she'd struck him. "Is that what you think this is?" "I don't know what this is. I don't know if you're protecting me because it's right, or because you need to prove you're not powerless anymore." "Both." The word came out harsh. "I'm protecting you because it's right, and because I can't watch another woman I care about get destroyed." "Does it matter why as long as you're safe?" "Yes, it matters. Because if you're doing this to heal your own wounds, what happens when I'm safe? When the crisis is over, do I become another Mary Sullivan, someone you helped and then forgot?" Gideon's hands dropped from her face. He stepped back, his expression shuddered. "Is that what you're worried about? That I'll lose interest once the danger's past?" "I'm worried that this intensity, this protectiveness is about the situation, not about me." "Then you don't know me at all." His voice went flat. "I don't do things halfway, Rebecca. I don't protect people I don't care about. And I sure as hell don't kiss women I'm planning to forget." He turned and walked out. The door closed behind him with controlled force. Rebecca stood frozen. Rosa appeared at her elbow. "That was stupid," the older woman said. "I know. He cares about you, really cares, and you throw it in his face." "I'm scared." Rebecca's voice broke. "I'm scared of trusting him and getting hurt. Scared of this being real and losing it. Scared of everything." "So you push him away before he can leave you." Rosa shook her head. "That's not protecting yourself. That's just another kind of running." Rebecca sank into the chair. Rosa was right. She knew Rosa was right. But 2 years of survival had taught her that trust was dangerous, that letting people close meant giving them power to hurt you. Even when those people had proven themselves over and over. Even when those people had literally fought battles on your behalf. Even when those people looked at you like you were something precious instead of something broken. "I'm an idiot," Rebecca whispered. "Yes, but fixable." Rosa pulled her to her feet. "Now go find him. Apologize. Tell him the truth instead of hiding behind fear." "What if he won't listen?" "Then you make him listen. You're not a victim anymore, Rebecca. You're a woman who gets to choose her own life. So choose." Rebecca found Gideon in the barn, or what was left of it. He stood in the ruins, hands in his pockets, staring at the charred beams and ashes. "I'm sorry," she said. He didn't turn. "For what?" "Being honest about your doubts. For being cruel when you've been nothing but kind." Rebecca moved closer. "You're right. I don't know you well enough to make accusations about your motives. And I don't have the right to question why you're helping me when I should just be grateful. I don't want gratitude. I know. You want trust. And I'm trying to give it to you. But Gideon, you have to understand, trusting people has destroyed me before. Trusting my mother's friends after she died, and they stole what little money she left. Trusting the dress shop owner who promised she'd never sell without telling me, then left me unemployed with 1 day's notice. Trusting Charles when he said he loved me before I learned love to him meant ownership." She stopped beside him, forced herself to continue. "So when you promise to protect me, part of me wants to believe it so badly it hurts. And the other part is screaming that believing will just lead to more pain. Those two parts are at war in me constantly. And sometimes the scared part wins and I say stupid things. Gideon finally looked at her. His eyes were tired. I can't make you trust me, Rebecca. I can only keep proving I'm trustworthy and hope eventually the evidence outweighs the fear. You've already proven it, multiple times. The problem isn't you, it's me. Then what do you need? What would make this easier? Time. But we don't have time. Rebecca's voice cracked. In 3 days they're coming back, and I don't know what happens then, and I'm terrified of losing this, of losing you before I even figured out what this is. Then stop trying to figure it out. Gideon turned to face her fully. Stop analyzing and questioning and protecting yourself. Just feel. Just be. Just trust that whatever happens, we face it together. I don't know how to do that. Neither do I. I've been alone so long I've forgotten how to let people in. He reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away. When she didn't, his hand cupped her cheek. But I'm willing to try if you are. Willing to be terrible at this together until we figure out how to be good at it. Rebecca leaned into his touch. What if they take me? What if 3 days from now, I'm on my way back to Chicago? Then I come get you. I don't care if I have to ride to Chicago and burn the Thornton house to the ground. I don't care if it costs every cent I have or every favor I'm owed. I will get you back. The fierce certainty in his voice should have frightened her. Instead, it filled her with warmth. That's a terrible plan. It's the only plan I've got. Gideon smiled slightly. I told you I'm not good at this. I don't do romance or pretty words. I do action and stubbornness and refusing to quit. I'm starting to like that about you. Yeah. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Yeah. Rebecca's breath caught. Gideon, I'm still scared. Still not sure I know how to trust anyone. But I want to try. With you. He pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her. She buried her face in his chest and let herself feel safe for the first time since the nightmare started. They stood that way for a long time, while the sun set and shadows grew long across the ruined barn. Tomorrow they'd keep preparing, keep fighting, keep building their defense against the threat coming in 3 days. But tonight, just for this moment, Rebecca let herself stop running and discovered that standing still in someone else's arms was the bravest thing she'd ever done. The 3 days passed like water through fingers. Marcus returned from Helena with a lawyer named Elizabeth Garrett, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who listened to Rebecca's story without judgment and began building a defense that focused not on denying the theft, but on proving necessity and duress. Tom brought back signed statements from 2 women Charles had assaulted, both willing to testify if it came to trial. And Gideon spent hours sending telegrams calling in favors, building a network of support that stretched across the territory. But none of it felt like enough. On the morning of the 3rd day, Rebecca woke to find Gideon already gone. She dressed quickly and found Rosa in the kitchen, her face drawn with worry. He's been up since 3, Rosa said, pouring coffee with hands that shook slightly. Planning with his men. They're preparing for war. It won't come to that. Sheriff Brennan isn't going to let things get violent. You believe that? Rosa's dark eyes held hers. Men like Richard Thornton don't accept defeat. If the law doesn't give him what he wants, he'll take it another way. Rebecca's hands tightened around her coffee cup. She'd been trying not to think about that possibility, trying to believe that civilization and law would prevail. But she'd seen Richard's face, seen the cold calculation in his eyes. He hadn't come all this way to leave empty-handed. The riders appeared just after noon, more than Rebecca expected. Sheriff Brennan led the group, but behind him came Judge Morrison, a portly man with white mutton chops and an air of self-importance. Richard and Charles Thornton flanked them along with their 3 hired guns, and bringing up the rear were 4 additional men wearing deputy badges that looked freshly minted. Gideon met them at the gate with Elizabeth Garrett beside him, and every man on the ranch visible and armed. Rebecca watched from her upstairs window, her heart pounding so hard she felt dizzy. "Sheriff Brennan," Gideon said. His voice carried clearly in the cold air. "Judge Morrison, I see you've brought an army." "Just ensuring proper enforcement of the law," Judge Morrison replied. His voice was pompous, practiced. "Mr. Hart, we have a warrant for the arrest of Rebecca Morgan. You're required by law to produce her immediately." "I'd like to see that warrant." Judge Morrison handed over papers. Elizabeth Garrett stepped forward to examine them, her expression unreadable as she read. "These documents are in order," she said quietly to Gideon. "Warrant signed by Judge Morrison, charging Miss Morgan with theft of property valued over $500. It's legal." "Based on false testimony," Gideon said. "That's for a court to decide," Judge Morrison replied. "Mr. Hart, I understand your desire to protect Miss Morgan, but the law is the law. She must face charges in Chicago where the crime occurred." "She's not going to Chicago." Gideon's voice went flat. "She'll face trial here in Montana Territory, where we can ensure she gets fair treatment instead of being railroaded by men with bought judges and intimidated witnesses." Judge Morrison's face reddened. "Are you implying that I'm stating facts. Richard Thornton has a history of using money and influence to manipulate legal proceedings. I have documentation of bribes paid to officials and Chicago witnesses coerced into silence evidence manufactured to convict innocent people." Elizabeth Garrett pulled papers from her satchel. "We're prepared to file formal complaints with the territorial governor about corruption in this warrant." "That's slander," Richard snapped. "Sheriff, arrest Hart for obstruction." "Now, hold on," Sheriff Brennan said nervously. "Nobody's arresting anybody yet. Let's all just calm down and—" "There's nothing to calm down about," Charles interrupted. He urged his horse forward, his handsome face twisted with rage. "That woman belongs to me. She was going to be my wife. She stole from my family and ran like a coward. And now she's hiding behind this rancher like some helpless victim when we all know what she really is." "And what is she?" Gideon's voice was dangerously quiet. "A thief. A liar. A woman who opens her legs for whoever offers protection." Charles's smile was cruel. "Tell me, Hart, how much did she have to give you to make you risk everything for her? Must have been quite a performance." The rage that crossed Gideon's face made several men step back. Even Charles paled slightly. "You want to repeat that?" Gideon's hand moved to his gun. "Gentlemen, please." Judge Morrison held up his hands. "Violence won't solve anything. Mr. Hart, you have two choices. Produce Miss Morgan peacefully, or I'll instruct the sheriff to search your property by force. Which will it be?" Rebecca couldn't breathe. This was it. The moment when Gideon would have to choose between law and protection, between his principles and his promises. She saw him look up at the house. Couldn't see his expression from this distance, but felt his gaze find her window. Then he turned back to the judge. "You want Rebecca Morgan. Come and get her." The words hung in the air like a declaration of war. "Mr. Hart," Sheriff Brennan said urgently, "don't do this. Don't make this a fight you can't win." "Can't win?" Gideon gestured at his men, 40 strong, all armed, all watching with cold determination. "Sheriff, you've got 6 deputies and 4 hired guns against 40 men who know every inch of this land and are prepared to defend it. You want to force this issue, you'll lose, and a lot of good men will die for nothing." "You're threatening law enforcement," Judge Morrison sputtered. "I'm stating reality. You bring violence to my land, you'll get violence back. Is Richard Thornton worth that price?" For the first time, uncertainty flickered across the judge's face. He looked at the armed men, at Gideon's absolute certainty, at the impossibility of taking Rebecca without bloodshed. "There must be a compromise," Elizabeth Garrett said quickly. "Judge Morrison, if you insist on arresting Miss Morgan, do it properly. Hold her trial here in Montana Territory, where she has access to legal representation and can present evidence of the circumstances that led to her actions. If she's convicted fairly, she'll serve her sentence. But if she's acquitted, Mr. Thornton accepts the verdict and leaves her alone. Absolutely not, Richard snapped. She faces justice in Chicago where the crime occurred. Chicago justice, you mean, Gideon said, where you control the judges and the witnesses and the outcome. No. She stays here or she doesn't go anywhere. You can't. I can. I am. Gideon's voice was steel. Judge Morrison, you have a decision to make. Try to take her by force and start a war you can't win. Walk away and let Thornton fight his own battles. Or agree to a fair trial here in Montana Territory with neutral parties and real evidence. Choose. The silence stretched. Rebecca could see the calculation in Judge Morrison's eyes. He'd been paid to deliver her to Thornton, but he hadn't been paid enough to die for it. A trial here would be highly irregular, the judge said slowly. So is trying to extradite someone based on manufactured evidence, Elizabeth countered. Judge, you know as well as I do that if this goes to trial in Chicago, Miss Morgan won't receive justice. She'll receive revenge. Is that really what Montana law stands for? Judge Morrison looked at Richard Thornton. Mr. Thornton, perhaps a trial here would... No. Richard's voice shook with fury. I didn't come 2,000 miles to let this woman escape justice. Sheriff Brennan, do your duty. Arrest her. Sheriff Brennan looked at the armed men surrounding them, looked at Gideon's face, looked at his own deputies who were starting to realize they'd been brought into something far more dangerous than a simple arrest. I can't do that, Mr. Thornton, not without bloodshed, and I won't start a war over a theft charge. Then you're a coward, Charles snarled. I'm practical. The sheriff turned to Gideon. Mr. Hart, I'll make you a deal. Miss Morgan agrees to house arrest here on your ranch pending trial in Montana Territory. No leaving the property, no contact with outside parties, and you guarantee she'll appear in court when summoned. Agreed, Gideon said immediately. This is outrageous, Richard protested. Judge Morrison, I paid you good money to... He stopped realizing what he'd just said. Every man present had heard it. The admission of bribery spoken in front of witnesses, legally damning. Judge Morrison went white. Mr. Thornton, I think you should stop talking. I think we should all stop talking, Elizabeth Garrett said sweetly. Because Mr. Thornton just admitted to bribing a judge, which is a federal crime, which means any warrants issued by that judge are now suspect, which means this entire proceeding is invalid. She turned to Sheriff Brennan. Sheriff, unless you want to be complicit in corruption, I suggest you return to Stillwater, and I suggest Mr. Thornton and his son leave Montana Territory before I file formal charges with the territorial marshal. You can't do this. Charles started toward Elizabeth. You can't. Jack's rifle cocked. The sound was very loud in the sudden silence. The lady's talking, Jack said mildly. You should listen. Charles stopped. Even he wasn't stupid enough to ignore a loaded rifle pointed at his chest. Sheriff Brennan, Gideon said, take them off my land, now, before this gets any uglier. The sheriff nodded, relieved to have an excuse to retreat. Mr. Thornton, I suggest you comply. You've admitted to bribery in front of multiple witnesses. Best thing you can do right now is leave quietly. This isn't over, Richard said, but his voice lacked its earlier certainty. Yes, it is. Gideon's voice was final. You've lost Thornton. Your bribe's been exposed. Your warrant's invalid. Your son's crimes are documented. You have no legal standing and no moral authority. You're done. Richard's face was purple with rage. For a moment, Rebecca thought he might do something stupid, might order his hired guns to start shooting regardless of consequences. But even Richard Thornton wasn't that foolish. He was outnumbered, outmaneuvered, and exposed. All his money and influence couldn't change those facts. You'll regret this, Richard said. Both of you. I have resources you can't imagine. Connections that reach... Chicago, Gideon interrupted. Your connections reach Chicago. This is Montana. Different rules out here. He gestured toward the gate. Now leave before I have my men escort you off at gunpoint. They left. Slowly, reluctantly, but they left. Rebecca watched them ride away, Richard and Charles rigid with fury. Judge Morrison slumped in his saddle, Sheriff Brennan looking grateful to escape with his life. Only when they'd disappeared from view did Rebecca let herself move. She ran downstairs through the house out into the cold where Gideon stood surrounded by his men. He turned at the sound of her footsteps. His face was still hard with the aftermath of confrontation, but when he saw her, his expression softened. Rebecca didn't think, didn't plan, just ran to him and threw her arms around his neck. Gideon caught her, held her tight. Around them, the ranch hands cheered and whooped, but Rebecca barely heard them. She was shaking, tears streaming down her face, unable to believe it was over. "You're safe," Gideon murmured against her hair. "You're safe. And they're gone, and they can't touch you anymore. You were going to start a war, risk everything, risk your men's lives. For you, yes." He pulled back enough to look at her. "Rebecca, I told you I wouldn't let them take you. I meant it." "I know. I believe you." She touched his face, feeling the stubble rough against her palm. "Thank you. For everything. For believing me when no one else did. For fighting when I couldn't. For being exactly who you promised you'd be. That's what people do when they—" He stopped. "When they what?" Gideon's gray eyes held hers. "When they care about someone. When they're falling for someone. When they can't imagine their life without that person anymore." Rebecca's breath caught. "Gideon, I know it's fast. I know we barely know each other. I know you've got every reason to be cautious." His hands cupped her face. "But I also know that the thought of losing you scared me more than any fight, more than any threat. And that tells me something important about what I'm feeling." "What are you feeling?" "Like I want you to stay, not because of danger or protection or obligation, but because I want to wake up every morning and see you across the breakfast table. Want to come home from work and find you mending shirts in the kitchen. Want to sit by the fire at night and argue about books and politics and everything else." He paused. "I want you, Rebecca. Not just safe, but here, with me." Rebecca felt tears spill over. "I'm still scared. Still not sure I know how to trust completely." "Then be scared. Be unsure. But be those things here." Gideon's voice was rough. "I'm not asking for perfection. I'm asking for a chance. A real chance to prove that not all men are like Charles Thornton. That some men keep their promises and mean their words, and would burn the world down before letting harm come to people they love. Love? Yes, love." He said it firmly without hesitation. "I love you, Rebecca Morgan. Might be the craziest thing I've ever said after knowing someone less than 2 weeks, but it's true, and I'm not taking it back." Rebecca laughed and cried at the same time. "You're impossible." "I'm stubborn. There's a difference." He smiled. "Now are you going to tell me you feel nothing, that these 2 weeks meant nothing, that you could walk away tomorrow and never think about me again?" "No, I couldn't do any of those things." Rebecca's hands slid from his face to his shoulders. "I'm falling for you too. Even though it terrifies me. Even though my brain says it's too fast and too risky and too dangerous to trust. My heart doesn't care about any of that." "Then listen to your heart." "My heart says kiss me." Gideon's smile widened. "Well, if your heart insists." He kissed her there in the cold with 40 men cheering and Rosa watching from the porch with satisfaction. Kissed her like she was precious and strong and worth every risk he'd taken. Kissed her until Rebecca forgot about fear and danger and the 2 years she'd spent running. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gideon pressed his forehead to hers. "Marry me," he said. Rebecca's eyes went wide. "What?" "Marry me. Make this official. Make it so that if anyone ever tries to hurt you again, They're not just challenging me. They're challenging my wife. And that's a whole different level of protection in Montana territory. That's the least romantic proposal I've ever heard. I'm a rancher, not a poet. Gideon pulled back to look at her. But I'm also serious. Rebecca, I want you here permanently. Want you to be my partner in everything. Want to build a life where you never have to run or hide or fear again. What if I'm terrible at being a rancher's wife? Then you'll learn. What if I'm terrible at being a husband? Then you'll learn. Rebecca smiled through tears. Gideon Hart, are you seriously proposing to me in front of your entire ranch? Yes. So everyone knows you're mine and I'm yours, and anyone who has a problem with it can take it up with me directly. Rebecca laughed. You really don't do anything the proper way, do you? Never have. Not planning to start. His eyes were serious despite the lightness in his voice. Is that a yes? Rebecca thought about the past 2 weeks. The terror and the rescue and the slow building of trust. Thought about Gideon's steady presence and fierce protection and the way he looked at her like she mattered. Thought about Rosa's warm kitchen and the ranch hands who'd accepted her without question and the feeling of finally belonging somewhere. Thought about the alternative. Running again, always looking over her shoulder, never trusting anyone completely, spending her life alone because fear wouldn't let her risk connection. That wasn't living. That was just surviving, and Rebecca was done merely surviving. Yes, she said. Yes, I'll marry you. On one condition. Name it. I'm not just decoration. I'm not just someone you rescued who now owes you obedience. I'm your partner. Equal say, equal respect, equal everything. Wouldn't want it any other way. Gideon kissed her again, quick and fierce. Partners. Partners. The ranch hands erupted in cheers again. Rosa was crying openly on the porch. Elizabeth Garrett was smiling with the satisfaction of a lawyer who'd just won an impossible case. And somewhere far away, riding toward the territory line with their plans in ruins, Richard and Charles Thornton learned an important lesson. That money and power and influence meant nothing when confronted with people who refused to be intimidated. That Montana territory didn't bend to Chicago tactics. And that some women, when pushed hard enough, didn't just survive. They found men worth standing beside. Men who kept their promises and meant their words and would burn empires to ash before allowing harm to those they loved. The wedding took place 3 weeks later in the Harts Peak Ranch House, with every rancher and ranch hand within 50 miles attending. Rebecca wore a dress Rosa had sewn simple but beautiful. Gideon wore his best suit and couldn't stop smiling. Sheriff Brennan came to offer apologies and congratulations. Judge Morrison didn't attend, having resigned his position rather than face charges for accepting bribes. And Richard Thornton sent one final telegram that Gideon burned without reading while Rebecca watched. The past didn't matter anymore, only the future. That night, after the celebration ended and the guests departed, Gideon and Rebecca stood on the porch watching snow fall across their land. Regrets? Gideon asked quietly. Not one. Rebecca leaned into his warmth. Only that I didn't find you sooner. You found me when I needed you most. That's all that matters. They stood in comfortable silence, two people who'd found each other in impossible circumstances and built something real from fear and courage and stubborn refusal to give up. Rebecca had spent 2 years running from her past. Now she was done running, done hiding, done letting fear control her choices. She was Rebecca Hart now, wife, partner, woman who'd survived destruction and found love on the other side. Woman who'd learned that sometimes the bravest thing you could do wasn't running away or fighting back. Sometimes the bravest thing was standing still and letting someone love you. And for the first time in 2 years, standing still felt exactly right.